Hi, this is Matthew Robert Payne. This is going to be somewhat of a short teaching. Uh, it's the Apostle Paul speaking in Thessalonians 1 Thessalonians 2, and we're going to have a look at a number of verses there and go forth from there and talk about them. So, uh, 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 1, for you yourselves know, brethren, that our coming to you was not in vain. So Paul was saying uh, uh, it was not a waste of time that we came and saw you. How many churches do visiting preachers preach to and bring a message to? No one pays attention to the message. No one goes on and changes their life because of the message. Sometimes a preacher may come to a certain congregation and the congregation not really receive what he's teaching. And in that instance, the preacher has come in vain. But the Apostle Paul is saying here, he said in the last teach that I did, that not only received him and received his gospel, but these guys had gone out and witnessed to their whole community and communities beyond, so much so that Paul said he didn't need to preach to the people in the town anymore because they'd done such a great job. Verse 2, but even after we had suffered before and were spitefully treated in Philippi, as you know, we were bold in our God to speak to you the gospel of God in much conflict. So even though the Apostle Paul was experiencing conflict and harassment and trouble, he put aside those cares about conflict and brought forth a word to these guys. Verse 3, for our exhortation did not come from error or uncleanness, nor was it in deceit. This is to be compared to what comes forth in the modern day. A lot of teaching comes forth as error in the modern day. A lot of preachers are unclean with the way they treat certain subjects and live certain lives. And some preachers are deceitful in the way they present things and their agendas, and they have specific agendas, and they come with these agendas to have people give them money and build up power and control in certain situations. The Apostle Paul was saying he didn't come in error. He didn't come and preach error. He's not unclean in his person, and he didn't come and preach in any deceitful way, which many pastors these days do. Verse 4, but as we've been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God who tests our hearts. So he didn't come to preach for man's approval. He wasn't looking for man's approval. When you're preaching not for man's approval and not wanting man's approval, you're able to preach a pure word. You're able to bring a hard word to a people, a word that convicts hearts, a word that brings change. So you can bring heavy and correctional words to people if you're not afraid of man, if you're not preaching to impress man. And Paul was such the apostle that he would bring a convicting message. For neither at any time did we use flattering words, as you know, nor a cloak for covetousness. God is our witness. So Paul didn't flatter them, and he didn't bring words and control to people to teach them to covet, to teach them to have a covetous lifestyle or be covetous toward them, earning money from them and making money from them. And that's what these preachers of deceit do, and many modern preachers appear and say that they'll do certain healings for a certain offering of $1,000. You can come forward for your healing, or you can, any donation above $100, you'll get a prophecy off the prophet, a personal prophecy, and they come with a cloak of covetousness. They come, part of their message is coveting, and they teach people to live in a covetous way. The whole prosperity doctrine is teaching people to want and desire the things of the world, and want and desire money. And the people who teach it have Learjets and houses worth $25 million and multiple houses, and they're multi-millionaires. And whilst there's people in India that can have a whole church built for $4,000, someone owns a house worth $25 million and think God's blessing them. So covetousness comes up quite a lot, and it's simply the idea of keeping up with the Joneses. And there's so many Christians who should be convicted every time they hear the word covetousness, because so many Christians are. So Paul says in verse 5, nor at any time did we use flattering words, as you know, nor a cloak for covetousness. God is our witness. So we didn't do anything underhanding. We didn't try and control you by saying nice things to you, and we didn't bring a message that extracted finances from you, nor did we seek glory from men, either from you or from others, when we might have made demands as apostles of Christ. So Paul didn't expect them to put him on a pedestal. He didn't expect them to revere him. He didn't preach for man's glory. He didn't bring a message for people to glorify him and treat him well. Though they did follow him, and they did respect him, and they did revere him, he wasn't seeking that in his message. He brought the pure and unadulterated gospel to these men, and he let the gospel fall where it may. Verse 7, but were gentle among you, just as a nursing mother cherishes her own children. So Paul treated everyone that he taught as spiritual children. He was like a father, and he's an image of a nursing mother. There's no one closer to you as you grow up than your own mother. And Paul was saying that he's like a nursing mother with little babies, and he was treating them like a nursing mother treats a child, defenseless, and feeding them and looking after every aspect of their well-being. So affectionately longing for you, we were pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but our own lives, because you had become dear to us. So some pastors, some preachers, they preach messages, but they stay at a distance. They keep a professional distance between them and the people that they're preaching to. And Paul said he not only shared the gospel, but he shared himself with them. In other words, he but also our own lives, shared the gospel of God, but also our own lives. So he broke bread with them and got to know them and allowed them to get to know him. In his preaching, if he shared his life with them, he would have used many illustrations out of his life to share the message that he's sharing. He'd be throwing himself under the bus and sharing hard things and sharing personal things with them. So he was not only sharing the gospel, but he was sharing of himself, of his own personality. And I'm a writer of books. I've got 110 self-published books on Amazon under my name, Matthew Robert Payne, and you'll find as you read my books, that's what I do. I share of myself. I not only teach on a certain subject, but as I go through, I share of my own life and give insights into my life. So people who consistently read my books come to really know me well because of all my sharing. And Paul was saying that here, that he not only shared the gospel with them, but they understood him and they knew him. For you remember, brethren, our labour and toil for labouring night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you. We preach to you the gospel of God. So Paul had a side gig, he had a side job, and he was saying, I think he's saying here that he laboured day and night doing other work to finance the gospel so that he wouldn't be a burden to them. And wouldn't that be refreshing for people to be preaching the gospel and not putting their hand out for money these days? Wouldn't it be refreshing to see? Wouldn't it be refreshing for you to give to a person because you love their preaching and you love what they're doing, rather than out of compulsion or a sense that you need to? So that's how Paul was. He believed in his gospel so much that he administered it for free and wasn't a burden on anyone. And he was a great example. So verse 10, you are witnesses, and God also, how devoutly and justly and blamelessly we behaved among you who believe. So how devoutly, worthy, justly, and blamelessly. There were no complaints. There was absolutely nothing wrong. You couldn't find fault, Paul was saying. with the way that we preach to you. And wouldn't that be a welcome relief today to have a famous teacher traveling the world and imparting to people, not taking up offerings, but supporting himself in business and having no accusations and having a blameless life and a blameless ministry. We can really, as we read and explore the letters of Paul, we can really come to know someone who was exemplary, someone that was above all, and someone who was really gifted in what he did. He really cared for the people. The people were like his children. He was like a spiritual father, and you can sense that in his letters. To the Galatians, he really poured his heart out to people who had been deceived and led astray by false apostles. And he was really pleading with them. You could really sense in between the lines that he really cared and he was really concerned for them. And Paul said at one stage that he'd gone through all these sufferings, and one of the sufferings he listed was his care for the people that he ministered to. He really had a heart for people. He exists today in heaven, and he really has got a heart for individuals that are reading his letters. He really hopes that you're ministered to as we go through parts of his letters, and I go through 2 verses a day as I read the Word of God. I pray that you're touched and you're ministered to, and you understand. This is come to the end of what he shared. I did it differently today, and just went one verse by one verse. Hope you learn something, or you're encouraged. God bless.